All right, Adam, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start by asking you about the almost brawl between Michael Tracy and Jim Acosta after the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Mhm.
Um, I wondered, I've read some of your stuff on MMA, like I'm a fan of your Twitter. Who wins that fight? And then number two, is this a signal of like a return of masculine honor to the culture in a way of settling disputes? I feel like we've lost the physicality of the world and people can sort of like run their mouths without any consequence or facing like real masculine hierarchy. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
That's an interesting question. Unfortunately, in the fight, I would have to give the edge to Acosta just because he looks a bit stronger and more athletic, which in typically in combat between two men with, relatively little to no training, the stronger guy will typically win. Um, as far as whether it's a return to honor-based masculinity, definitely not. This is just like two incredibly imbalanced guys who work in the media and are a bit too overly invested in political narratives, getting way too carried away with petty, disagreements. But it speaks to how insane that the Epstein conspiracy shit has really gotten. That, like, I believe the way it happened was that Tracy was asking some questions to that Miami Herald journalist. I forget her name, but she broke a little bit of the Epstein story, broke air quotes, but since then she's kind of acted like she was personally raped by Epstein, or that she should be like extended the same protections as like the girls who were trafficked by him when they were 15 or 16. Very typical, like, crazy media bitch kind of stuff. I believe Tracy was just asking her a couple questions. Um, I commend Tracy's work on the Epstein stuff. There's been a lot of chaos in conspiracies and just like a complete collapse of criticality around that whole issue. He does have the specific form of mono-minded autism it takes to really, throw yourself at the altar of such a contentious issue, and just pursue it because, he gets pleasure in being right first. That said, he does have a very obnoxious personality, and he doesn't him and I have like gone back and forth before, and as many things as I commend his courage on, like this reporting, he also has some tendencies that really bother me. Like for him, it's always more important to be seen as like right ahead of the time more than it is to like take a stand or actually be a part of like of something bigger. Like he just wants to. He's very. I respect it, and it triggers me just like anybody else. But yeah, no, I don't think there was anything very dignified about all of this. And at first I was like, Jesus, Jim Acosta is really imbalanced. But then Tracy also reveals that he's just as chaotic because he was tweeting about it like 100 times for the next 2 days.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, just get over it, or just let it go.
Yeah, Acosta has a history. He's the one who almost like went at it with Seb Gorka in the White House garden, like during the first Trump administration.
That's a more interesting matchup. I think Seb Gorka might have some. Looks like he has some grip or something. Thick neck,
Yeah.
big hands.
And on the subject of, as far as the Miami Herald reporter goes, like I was just noticing like the personalizing of that event, like watching Instagram videos of like girl reporters hiding under tables that are like clearly
Oh yeah. Olivia.
like out of danger, but like, you can, they're like, contorting and
yeah, it's hard. a colleague of mine and myself at Tablet are constantly sending each other jokes about who's that really pretty Free Press reporter, Olivia. What's her
Olivia
last name?
Reingold.
Yes, yeah. Her, she's very successful, and it's obvious why. She's pretty and sort of has combined, TikTok virality with something resembling journalistic objectivity or whatever. But that video is just perfect. She's like, I don't know what's going on. She's like still aware of her angles and whatnot.
Yeah.
Really insane. Like really kind of like the commitment to like her brand is, interesting, but it validated a lot of the jokes I had made about that girl behind her back over. It's funny enough, actually, like she's very beautiful, even a bit more so in person. And last year at Tablet's award show, I saw her across the room, and I had never spoken to her in my life, but I guess because I had made fun of her videos so much among friends that in that moment, I was like, oh yeah. And I waved to her like, hey, like, and then she kind of looked at me like, who the fuck are you? And I'm like, oh God, we don't actually know each other. It's just like, I have such familiarity from making fun of her viral videos. Very embarrassing.
Yeah, in that video, she kind of stands up, and then you see these other guys are like finishing their drinks, kind of, and like, the danger has passed. I'm guilty.
It looked like a weird one because the shots went off, but it was outside the room, so everybody's kind of like a bit unsure of what's going on.
Yeah,
Dana White, UFC president, looked like he was kind of intrigued and bemused by the whole situation. But yeah, this shit's no good. I mean, there's a huge problem with political violence in this country. People just generally losing their minds and doing things that are going to end them dead or in prison.
Yeah. Do you think, Adam, do you think that I was thinking about the fact that the legacy media was in the room and got to see like their own lab creation in a way? Yeah. Do you think it changes their worldview or their reporting in any way, or no?
Absolutely not. Like just as a personal example, my sister has like mental health problems, and like every 3 months she has some grand epiphany about the error of her ways. It lasts about a day, and then she goes back to her bullshit. And I assume that's what it will be like for all these journalists, because yeah, sure, they might have had a moment of like, Jesus Christ, like we are the problem, but it doesn't last. They'll go right back to work. They'll have the same conversations. The same anxieties will ricochet off one another with the same financial incentives to tell versions of stories that are completely unfair and completely overheated. And even if it's like, the way it works now is there's like this dialectical relationship between the dying legacy media and the influencer class. So, you have like this legacy media that'll say, maybe we need to dial it back, blah, 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 like kind of the centrist line, but then they'll platform people like Hassan Piker or, people in that part of left-wing media, and they'll keep doing, I think Hassan Piker said something last week that was completely insane. Oh yeah. I saw his interview in the New York fucking Times.
Yeah.
Like in a New York Times interview is just like, well, Engels. I'm like, dude, you have never read Frederick Engels. You read the Wikipedia or the AI version of this Engels article, but he's like citing Engels' work on systemic violence or whatever, the way that the system kills people through poverty and labor exploitation. And then he uses that to justify what Luigi Mangione did, And this is like, people that, 20 years ago would have been shocked by this kind of content are just like, nodding along to this now, like the problem with extremism is it drags everything to the extreme. So like the levers of normality or institutional power keep getting dragged there too, especially as their system and their economic incentivization changes and weakens. They have to start embracing these people who do fucking numbers, And what does numbers is fear, polarization, and stress, anxiety. Like the things that make us upset is what keeps us clicking.
Yeah, I think Hassan Piker he's just doing like cosplay. I just interviewed Kurt Schlichter and he called it like Che Guevara cosplay.
Totally.
And he's like a Turkish trust fund kid. He's not even an American. He came back here for college. Like I lived in Turkey a long time ago. I know exactly the social class that he emanates from. But it still causes like mentally unstable fringe characters to like actually carry out the violence.
Totally. I mean, one thing people have to understand too is like it's so easy to write these people off as like, champagne communists or whatever. But every revolutionary was a champagne communist. Lenin was an aristocrat. Che Guevara was a very successful doctor. Like these people are, committed to their ideology. And I think Hassan, even though he's not, this motherfucker is not Lenin, he's not Che Guevara, he's not reading the theory, he is not an intelligent or intellectual person, but he has these beliefs, these kinds of, and everything's a little different now because everybody kind of gets, you're not reading books and developing a coherent worldview. You're reading memes and you're reading internet articles and clips and sort of developing this collagist, chaotic worldview. But I think Hassan is generally, he believes this shit. I don't think he's as much of a liar as we think. I think he's a self-righteous little fuck. And he's also preaching to an audience of very young and very stupid people. Whether he knows or not that he's like actually propelling people towards doing some shit, I don't know. But he has to assume that it's possible on some level. Like if you regularly go online every day and say that your political opponents are not just your political opponents, but evil people who want to enslave and subjugate your fellow citizens, I think it's, especially it's like what he's a Twitch streamer. It's like the most mentally ill audience in the world. Yeah. He has some culpability, no doubt about it, but he's just like one of many too. And certainly there's just as much retarded stuff in the influencer sphere on the right as well, which is something has really been made clear to me over the last year and a half or so. And all this shit is just, bad. And ultimately has just, that's a different conversation. But like if I go back to November 2024, we won a huge victory. Donald Trump overcomes endless onslaught of legal bullshit and a literal bullet and, wins an election dominantly, and everything felt like it was possible and new. Flash forward to now, all that optimism has been wiped out, not because of necessarily the Trump or the administration's fault, but because the media sphere that was built around Trump that helped propel him back to office has been completely corroded, What
do you think's behind that? Like Tucker and Megyn Kelly and Candace, like all of these people counter signaling and going against Trump. Like, what do you think's behind that?
Many things. And it's really hard to sort out like Tucker's psychological goals. I do think he's intelligent. I do think he knows what he's doing. But you have to remember, like, Tucker always kind of hated Trump, like after January 6th, it was the Tucker messages that leaked where him and Megyn Kelly were talking shit about what a retard they thought Trump was for thinking that the election was a little weird. So I think, you know, he might have always just had kind of a waspy contempt for Donald Trump's style or what he represented. Mm-hmm. And then I think, you know, he's always had maybe a little bit of fluency with anti-Semitism. At least that's what I know from people who've associated with him over the years. Maybe more of like a generic waspy anti-Semitism, though, like fuck my, yeah, fuck my banker, fuck my lawyer, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But after he lost his job to Fox, he clearly became a contemptuous person. And I don't know if he's deliberately been leading a shadow vertical to oppose Trump from the right, so to speak, but that is essentially what it's become. When you platform people like Ian Carroll or Daryl Cooper, Fuentes, all these people who just regularly say that Trump is a liar and a slave to Jews or whatever, you can't also claim to be like the primary media figure behind the Trump movement. So he very much like slotted himself into this position where he has the credibility of the MAGA base while subverting it at the same time. And it's been remarkably effective. And then there's, of course, a bunch of people beneath that vertical. I think it's changing now. I think a lot of people are hip to like what Tucker has become and the dangers that he presents and how ultimately like toxic and damaging anti-Semitic, like there's only been one successful right-wing anti-Semitic movement, and it resulted in the death of 6 million Jews and the destruction of the entire of Europe. Like, it's not like most Americans would never want to go down that kind of path. And I think, you know, most Americans find anti-Semitism to be a bit repugnant. You know, it just doesn't like take root the same way here. You know, like in Germany, it was easy to demonize Jews. Like there was like two forms of Jews. There was like the ghetto Jews that were easy to like regard as parasitic and, you know, almost like how you could, you know, you could compare like migrants today. You know, they're living in squalor, living off the state largely. And then the other part of the Jews was like bankers. So like, that's what they focused on. But in America, Judaism is so much more, Jews are so well integrated into our world, you know, like, I was the only Jewish friend out of all my friends growing up. And certainly they, you know, there was a couple Jewish jokes here or there, but like, we never really thought about it. It doesn't have the same power. And because of that, anti-Semitism in America is typically much more from like a left-wing anti-Zionist orientation, even when it's coming from the right. And that's what I think we're seeing now, is a lot of people on the right are getting hip to the fact, like, I never, ever, ever want to be part of a political movement with fucking Hassan Piker. Like, absolutely not. This guy wants me dead. So why is Tucker hosting this guy and his uncle and all these people on their show? They want us dead. And I don't think that, I don't think Tucker's thing will have much more juice going forward, but, you know, as far as how useful it can be in like demoralizing a Republican base in the midterms, that I think remains to be seen.
Yeah, that's what I wonder, is if these people actually have any juice electorally.
They don't, you know, but like a little, you know, a large media presence can do a lot to demoralize people. I think the numbers are like, they basically speak for themselves. Like on the Iran war, like Trump commands like 90% of Republican support with that shit or whatever. So like anti-Semitism, there'll never be a successful right-wing anti-Semitic party ever in America. But you see enough memes out there about how Trump is not, you know, is thwarting his campaign promises, or just shit doesn't feel like it's going right. And I think that's a big part of it. If shit just doesn't feel like it's going right, there's just like a general level of discontent that can definitely hurt you electorally.
Yeah. Do you think, as far as the media is concerned, do you think there's any going back? Like, I think about Tucker and the fact that he knows Victor Davis Hanson and like must watch his stuff. And we've lost like complete and total humility around knowledge.
Yeah.
And like deferring to, there's the whole debate about who's an expert and what is expertise and all that stuff, but like not approaching subject matter with humility. So do you think there'll ever be a return to some kind of, I don't want to call it establishment media, but rigor of any kind, or are we just headed in the direction of like retarded influencers and like this kind of half-baked, half-witted ecosystem of, people with like mental issues?
It's so hard to make a prophecy about this because I feel like on one hand I could be way too positive and optimistic and say, yes, there will always be an audience for sophisticated, well-sourced information. There will always be an audience for the truth. And I think that's true, but unfortunately, it's not the majority of people. I think most people's attention spans have been, even mine, Jesus Christ, like at nighttime, I'm reading, I've been reading a lot of Laszlo Krasznahorkai. I can never pronounce his name. The Nobel Prize winning fiction writer. And then I find myself kind of dreading opening the book. Yeah. And 3 hours go by where I've just been scrolling through my phone, and then all of a sudden it's 12:30. I'm like, well, I guess I'm not reading tonight, And I think that's a very common experience. It's very hard to think about things in broader and more sophisticated, cohesive ways because there's just so much. Can we find a way to make the system as it's in the direction it's going in a bit better? Yeah. I think we can. And I think, some publishers have already done it. I think Tablet, not to advertise my employer too much, but I think we've done a really great job at sort of coexisting with the internet while delivering a high quality literary journalistic product.
Is there anything else that you're a fan of? Like, I'm not interested really in the free press anymore.
I never read it much.
Just find it like kind of tedious. Like, are there any other publications that you think are doing good work?
Yeah, there's some. Certainly the scene I came out of, I still pay attention to my friends' podcasts, The Perfume Nationalist and like Filthy Armenians Adventures. As far as like magazines, publications, there's good Substacks out there. I still read a couple art magazines from time to time, but by and large, I would say there's not a whole lot I'm super enthusiastic by, and I basically read the same stuff that everybody else does. There's good stuff even in like publications that aren't great anymore, if you know how to look for it. Mm-hmm. I read the Washington Free Beacon. I read the Washington Examiner. Those are very good news sources, I find. Stuff like that. But as far as like what Tablet does, sophisticated literary long form, there's not a whole lot outside like the ones we all know and have been around forever and have been corrupted to varying extents.
Yeah. Another question about kind of post October 7th. I was thinking about like, we talked about Olivia Reingold before, and she like recently did this thing where it was like, everything's personalized, and she wrote this thing. It was like, I'm an October 8th.
I read it. Yeah, I saw it on her Instagram or something.
The local fry and like the announcement of it. That's like one example, but more kind of on the male side, like Dave Portnoy, Michael Rappaport, that Columbia professor, Shai, I forget his name, but there was a lot of like acting out from American Jews that I thought was embarrassing.
Of course.
And scoldy and like disempowered, kind of like pussy behavior. And I actually discovered your Twitter, like reading your stuff. I'm like, oh, this guy's like pushing back against this, but he does it in like an empowered, kind of masculine way. And then I was thinking about like American Jews versus Israelis. Like Israelis are like respected as tough people.
Totally.
American not so much, and seem to even like cause more anti-Semitism with their own, like they're acting out against it in a way, if that makes sense.
I mean, the problem with one of the big problems with Jewish frameworks in the West is they're still appealing to liberal institutions of power as if we're still in the Clinton administration and Jews are still a protected class, which is just not the case in a post-woke landscape. Jews are successful white people. That's what we are now. A lot of this goes back. I mean, these debates are not new either. Like, you go to the origins of the Jewish question in the late 19th century, which prior to Hitler was a question asked by Jewish intellectuals, literally what to do with the Jews. There was two primary schools of thought. Left-wing Jews believed to save themselves, they had to embrace communism, liquidate their ethnic and religious identity into the cause. That's how you have something like, Southern Poverty Law Center, ACLU. Like, these are pro-migration, pro-third world to a large extent, because they believe Jews would be safe so long as we're just one of many minorities integrating into Western societies. The other opposite end of that was Israel, Zionism. That was the right-wing response by Jews to the Jewish question. We need a state. We need strength. My personal journey with my own Jewishness has been a very long one, because when I was a younger man, and I just viewed how my family was, my dad, my grandfather, where these men with all these liberal and left-wing assumptions about the world, but this crazy rampant, anti-Islamism and Zionism, and I saw it as hypocritical. And then on my own political journey, man, I've been all over the place, and I knew there was something wrong with liberalism as a very young age, and I gravitated towards ultra leftism, communism, left communism, which is like Italian Bordiga, like, not only are the liberals wrong, but all the communists are also retards, and we need to do it this way, blah, blah, blah. And then from there, I started getting slowly red-pilled, which dovetailed in 2016 when I got on 4chan and all those kinds of boards.
How did that start? Like, how did your red pilling start?
The rabid censoriousness of leftists throughout the 2010s. Where it wasn't even just like a left versus right thing, but it was about neutralizing even all leftists of having the same opinion. So, like, for instance, I always, fancied myself a bit of an intellectual snob. I was a class first communist, like questions of race are arbitrary, etc. And, I got a lot of pushback for that. And then I just started to see so much hypocrisy on the left, more historic reading, all people ask questions like, what about the failures of the Soviet Union, the collapse of it? And all communists can say, oh, they failed to achieve real communism. What do you mean they failed to achieve real communism? It was real communism, at least the closest thing our history has ever had to it. And, just like I slowly started to generate interest in right-wing politics, in like the fierce antagonism of it. A lot, and this was like fueled by like art and music that I liked, you know, neo folk, black metal. And because of that, and I think this is very common, like when an ultra leftist gets red pilled, they do end up internalizing some like really dangerous anti-Semitic ideals. And I did for a while have this sort of like beating my own, like, you know, beating myself up, like contemptuous anti-Semitism. But I quickly realized that anti-Semitism in American politics, right or left, ultimately fuels left-wing political movements, because anti-Zionism is one of the primary organizing architectures of left-wing political movements in the United States and Europe. And also, personally, after October 7th, I did start to like realize, my God, anti-Semitism does have this way of like, because it's so irrational, it's not, most time, you know, you might go in, like, if you internalize anti-black racist ideals or whatever, it could be pattern recognition processes from you going into really rough neighborhoods and just picking up like anxieties, bigotries, or whatever. With Jews, it's like, you don't even know most of the people who are Jewish half the time, right? And that's what fuels the anti-Semitism. It's a conspiratorial lack of a worldview. It's based on nothing but anxiety, memes, and things that really don't exist. And because of that, I think post October 7th, there were just so many things that I observed. One, you know, you go from this being like the domain of jokes among your edgelord friends while romping around the city or whatever, to pieces of shit like Jake Shields getting 50,000 likes on an X post that is pro Hitler, you know, like it's like a disease. It spreads so rapidly. And I think the problem with Jews is, in this world, they don't find political home on left or right wing politics, you know, because the left views them as white people, therefore not a protected class deserving of protection. And then the right just views them as fucking kikes who are pulling the strings of the media and the banks and whatever. And this became very clear. Like, say what you want about Israel's response to October 7th, but to me, it seems clear that they had to respond. You can't allow 1,700 of your youth citizens to fucking get massacred without making. There is not a single state that would take that on the chin. None. If anything remotely, if terrorists from Zimbabwe stormed Coachella, Zimbabwe would be nuked off the map. That's how the United States would deal with it. You can't tolerate
100%.
these things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like the way that I would just see the story being covered where anytime the civilian death toll got inflated, and like New York Times and the Post using Hamas's death toll numbers. And I was like, man, there's a real, people say Israel controls the media, but I think the reality of it is that as powerful as Israel's media arm is just as powerful as the anti-Israel media arm is, you know? And at this moment in time, the favor started tilting away from Israel. And I think that was Hamas's goal. And that is like the brilliance of their political strategy. They knew they were going to do something abominable that had to be responded to violently. And they knew that as bad as it got, it was only going to fuel their cause, because more dead people, more blown up buildings just means that the Western media apparatus turns against Israel. And I think that's kind of the real tragedy of the war, is that Hamas kind of did achieve its strategic goals, even if it's severely weakened going forward as a military force. But ultimately, they are terrorist ideologues. They will die just to change opinions slightly going forward, because they view themselves as fighting an infinite, never-ending jihad.
Yeah, it's incredible to hear, like, you know, Tim Dillon or Candace Owens like talk about the genocide. I'm just imagining, like, how long would Tim Dillon tolerate someone firing rockets at Manhattan and like threatening his life and preventing him to go get like a drink and a cheeseburger? Or he like commanded the US military like destroy these people. Like, that's the reality of it. Anything else is just like an underlying belief in the illegitimacy of Israel as a nation, I think, or just fucking just stupidity and ignorance of the region and the politics and like, and, you know,
it's so chaotic. It's so like incoherent too, because like on the right, they depict Israel as if it's still like the bastion of third worldist leftist politics, secretly shoehorning Islamic migration into the West or whatever. It's like, are you fucking... Bibi Netanyahu is like the most successful right-wing leader of any Western aligned state. He's also like obviously like a tough, badass, like macho kind of man. He's like the complete opposite of what we typically associate with a left-wing politician. Like, he is a strong man leader. And honestly, fucking thank God. There was a time when I had some criticisms of his as a leader. Now I see it very differently, that Israel would be completely fucked if they let one of his left-wing opposition rise to power, trying to like create a single state, a one-state solution or whatever. There'd be suicide bombs going off every single day. I think at least at the very least, you can say Bibi Netanyahu, who has a very realistic worldview and understands the stakes of the time that he lives in and the goals of his state or whatever. And I think he did a great job amongst a truly awful, awful political media situation.
Yeah. It's interesting. Somebody, I think it was Amy Therese, wrote something about these like lesser girly men like Tucker Carlson, criticizing Trump, and people like Netanyahu that have to make serious decisions and are engaged with the real world. And then we have these podcasters that are just like emotional, kind of girly men, basically.
That fucking laugh that Tucker does, awful.
I didn't get what I wanted, and I'm taking like my toys home with me, like kind of attitude about geopolitics, international affairs. It's like, it's so embarrassing. But
it's so crazy that they actually thought Trump was going to be like meaningfully challenge the Israeli alliance. Like, he fucking loves he got the Abraham Accords done his first term. Like, he's probably the most pro-Jew, pro-Israel president the United States has ever had. But a lot of people projected, because he has the energy of a radical in a lot of ways, and he is a radical in a lot of ways, people projected their peculiar brands of radicalism onto him. But he was always very clear about how he sees the world, you know? Like, he believes in hard power, not soft power. He believes in stable military alliances. He believes in avoiding, prolonged ground wars with goals of spreading democracy. He prefers the old-fashioned method of just fucking dropping the bombs and getting out.
Yeah. Do you think there's been a failure of the Trump administration to, first of all, I think there's an issue with the American mindset on international affairs to begin with, because of traffic isolation and cultural isolation from the rest of the world. Also, post-Iraq war, no forever wars, et cetera, which we all, I think, like most sensible people agree with. But there seems to be like the Trump administration has not connected the fact, in my opinion, that the intervention in Iran is actually MAGA and is beneficial and necessary for the MAGA voter who lives in a flyover state, and hasn't like made that connection. So that, like, I keep hearing this stupid argument over and over and over again, like, how does this benefit me?
Yeah.
I live in middle America. I don't care what happens over there. And it's like as if America could just sit out like geopolitics and international affairs.
Well, right. Well, certainly a lot of people learned the wrong lessons of the Iraq War. People were like, oh, we can't ever get involved in the Middle East again, as if that was, as if that's a realistic way to think. Like, the failure of the Iraq War is that Saddam Hussein had absolutely fucking nothing to do with 9/11. That's the point of that war. You don't launch a war against someone who has nothing to fucking do with the situation that you're in. And if anything, it was even more irrational given that Saddam Hussein led a mostly secular government and was actively had his forces fighting jihadis. So, but as far as like what you were saying about the administration failing in their messaging, I think it's important to remember one thing is that there is my colleague Jacob Siegel has been writing about this. There's a big distinction between actual voters and MAGA media. Have they been failing to message correctly to MAGA media? Yeah, but at the same time, that's a fool's errand, because I think, as we know at this point, Candace Tucker, these people are not going to give a charitable interpretation of this war. As far as the base, they're widely supportive. Most people understand the necessity of, not allowing a jihadist, Islamist, apocalyptically evil state have nuclear weapons. What I wish they would do is they need to be a bit more clearer on that point and explain the way that their strategy differs from previous presidents. Because dealing with the Iranians in diplomacy and perpetuity was Obama's strategy. That's the Iran deal. Let's try and give them the benefit of the doubt, act as if they're rational statesmen, give them, this oversight program. And then what happened? They just kept thwarting the oversight program and kept building the bombs. I think what the Trump administration was doing is they tried to negotiate with them. They realized quickly the Islamist bluster is not a front. They really are this fucking crazy. And they gave them a deadline. Iran missed the deadline. It's time to go. It's time to just put an end to this thing. As far as like if the war is actually going well or not, I think that does remain to be seen, and I don't know how they're going to handle it. A lot of different opinions on the matter have been floated to me. I think ultimately, what makes warfare so precarious and difficult in the modern world is the 24/7 global digital media cycle, scrutinizing every move, everything, because it gets you into this point where you're sort of hesitant. You're like, the people don't seem so happy. Gas prices might rise. Have we killed enough of them? Have we made our point? But I think the Iranians, to give them a credit, they don't fucking stop. They're not going to bend on their demand that they should be allowed to enrich uranium. And I think, the only like real long-lasting peace that has been achieved from warfare has been total victory scenarios, World War II anytime you are unsure about your victory, I think that means you probably haven't won. So a lot of me thinks they should just go fucking total war, you know, to use the Boyd Rice phrase. But I don't know. I'm not a foreign policy expert by any means. And I'm sure they have smarter people than me sort of asking these same questions. But let's face it, the longer the war goes on, the less people are going to be sure it was the smart thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. What is kind of changing topic here? What is the psychology of conspiracy stuff? Like we talked about, I'm just shocked by the Jew brain rot stuff among
Yeah.
smart people. And I've always thought of it as like a narcissism thing and an inability to see complexity. But do you have any opinion on like the psychology of conspiracy stuff?
Yeah. So I wrote a piece in 2025 for Tablet called Epstein Apophenia. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. I have to email this guy back right now. And Epstein apophenia is, apophenia is a term that basically describes the malaise of the Oedipus Ma character in Thomas Pynchon's The Crying of Lot 49. Clinically, it means the seeing of patterns in everything, whether they're there or not. You know, you just start to connect dots between things that are random. But ultimately, this kind of apopheniac conspiratorial thinking is a narcissistic viewpoint. It's the desire to think you know something that no one else does, that you have connected the dots, that you are special, that you have risen above propaganda and seen the cold reality of the world. You're fucking special. This is huge. It's obviously way bigger now because there's so many more people flipping through forums and TikTok and social media that feel like they're doing this, connecting the dots of the world. But if we take something like Jeffrey Epstein, for instance, it's gotten out of control. I have known, God, I first started talking about this story 2 years ago when I realized that the youngest victim of Epstein was only 15. And I just remember thinking to myself, 15? Iggy Pop had sex with like two 14-year-olds in the Legs McNeil punk rock book. This is like, some of our favorite artists and musicians used to do this shit routinely just because it was the times or whatever. So the idea that he was a pedophile was fake. Was he a pervert? Abso-fucking-lutely. Was he an evil person? Well, yeah, most definitely. But there has never been any evidence that he trafficked any of these girls to anyone other than himself. And this is one that I will say is the administration's fault. They had way too many of their people on podcasts promising that they would figure out the Epstein thing. And they backed Trump into a corner because Trump always intuited, I knew Epstein. Like, this is gonna fuck me over. I knew him. What am I supposed to do about it? Everyone that was wealthy knew him. But Kash Patel, they would just hammer this shit on every podcast. So then they're in a place where they have to put the files out. There's about 100 investigations still being carried out in those files. So they have to redact. The redactions then look like they're part of the conspiracy. And then they put out the rest of the files and it completely clears everybody not named Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein. And then how do people receive it? Oh, well, they must be hiding the rest. This is apopheniac thinking. It'll never end. We could get a fucking video documentary showing every moment of Jeffrey Epstein's life, from the time that he was born to the time that he fucking died in prison. Whether he killed himself or he was murdered, as the conspiracy goes. And people would still say they're hiding something from us. They must have edited here. It never ends. It's so, the fact that this isn't even like, this was always a thing, you know, conspiracies used to be fun, you know, limited to groovy intellectuals, you know, talking with their friends, reading weird books. You know, I used to be one of those people, but I never took this shit seriously. Now we have that tendency legitimized by a large portion of the legacy media and on a mass scale. Everyone is retarded now. It's terrifying.
It's true. From like it's left and right, like the Epstein. I saw a woman, I live in Los Angeles. I saw like a woman at a No Kings thing with a giant like a banner that just said Epstein files. No,
very original.
Like, okay, like what, you know. But I guess last question, Adam, what is I keep seeing on Twitter like people have mentioned the Dime Square movement or something. Does that ring a bell or not? Like,
yeah. I was a part of it to an extent.
What is it? I'll just tell you. Like, I lived in that neighborhood years ago. Like in from like kind of 2009 to 2016, and then I read something on Twitter like, as if it was some kind of like significant cultural movement had emanated from that neighborhood, which was like, there was the Dimes Cafe, which were these like kind of annoying liberal, this like Brazilian girl opened up an insufferable cafe there.
Right.
So what is the significance of it? Like, is it a real thing?
It was. Yeah, it was real. Important or not, it's hard to say. I think it was basically more important in some ways than people think and less important than other people think. It was for sure. It popped off during COVID. So it honestly felt like all of a sudden all the friends you'd made on the internet came to life. You know, it was like this surreal thing where you'd go to this party and people would come up to you and introduce themselves to you as their screen name or whatever.
Oh,
yeah.
Someone just lived like on the Lower East Side in Chinatown, like in that.
Yeah. It became a thing because Anna and Dasha started using the phrase to describe the neighborhood that they lived in, Dime Square, which is kind of a old name for that neighborhood. But it became like, it became like Substacks, podcasts, writers, and all these people, you know, My Thing, Safety Propaganda, Red Scare, certainly. My friend Alex Beanstalk did a lot of stuff there. Peter Vack. And we started doing like events together and stuff, just like readings, you know, gatherings to get the fuck out. And it felt good for a while. It did kind of feel like you were a part of something, you know, just something happening. And I guess what made it unique and sort of overwritten about to the point that it existed at all was because it was really coming from a right-wing viewpoint. And an alienation towards left-wing control of cultural institutions in New York City and the broader world. You know, like me, I was a regular ass art critic not but 10 years ago, and I got completely shut out of that world. So I started blogging and podcasting, and it was kind of freeing in a way, because then I could really I went balls to the wall and just started saying whatever I believe, built an audience. And then there was a couple of venues where it really started to congeal. The main one was Sovereign House, which was on East Broadway, basically a couple buildings down from the 517 bar.
Mm-hmm.
And it was good times. Like, just a lot of, maybe I'll look back on it as my glory days, maybe not. I always was a bit more, I never totally allowed myself to be swept up into the Dime Square branding. I guess I'm just a little too renegade or just like arrogant to ever be like fully part of a group. And it's kind of worked against me now, because I feel like I've been kind of left off the narrative, even though I was one of the main people or biggest influences when this thing first started popping off. The problem is that after the initial wave, which was in 2021, a lot of kids just started coming to the parties, and they were so eager to be documented and historicized on the internet that they started letting left-wing people into the midst to chronicle the thing. And some people did, some people wrote some perfectly fair profiles, but specifically they let this guy, Mike Crumpler, in. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he does this Substack called the Crump Stack. And it's really just like, he documents everything he sees. He's like, it's scary. It's like he's a Fed, and if he's around, you just like walk the other way, because you don't want to end up, him interpreting whatever the fuck you're doing and putting it in this website. And I think that was kind of the beginning of the end, because people started losing sight of what it actually meant, of what the importance of this thing actually was. And like, I don't know, the way I look at it is this. It was like 2 years that it lasted. I had my climax. I put on a safety propaganda event at Sovereign House in 2023. We had a bunch of great writers. I staged a play that I wrote, and I played my band, Botch Chattification. We ended the show, Alex Beanstalk and I's band. That was our first ever show. And that felt like a little last hurrah for the Dime Square era before I went, mainstream and started making the real money with Tablet. Thank you to them. I have no idea how they took a chance on me, but it's worked out so far. But it is really funny to think about, because I was like doing this underground, incredibly offensive writing and content. And David Samuels, Tablet's literary editor, used to be a teacher of mine at NYU, and he sort of found my Substack. I was like, I remember this kid. This is fucking great. And he just offered me the job, and it was hugely, I will have to thank him. Like, whenever I get my Lifetime Achievement Award or whatever, I will have to really thank him, because my wife got pregnant, and I'm just like, fuck, like, how am I going to pay for this? And he came through and really changed my life. So thank you to him. But yeah, Dime Square was fun, short-lived. I think it meant something. I don't think it meant a lot. I think of it like think about no wave music, No wave is this incredibly overly historicized scene, but in reality it's like 7 bands, 1 compilation album, and it lasted like a year and a half. Yeah. I'm not saying Dime Square is equivalent to that, but it's kind of like that. It was short, it did exist, sort of. But it's, it doesn't really have the defining artworks like No Wave does, Like No Wave only has 1 compilation. We don't even have that. But I guess, Red Scare is kind of a defining work, and when it was good. And I like to think Safety Propaganda is a defining work. I feel like it's my defining work to a large extent. It's my living art project. 5 years of my life, basically everything I thought during those times is out there for consumption. I think we need to change how the world is so different now. Why can't my Substack be my defining work? I worked on it as hard as I'd work on a book. Why is it not an artwork just because it exists on a social media platform?
Yeah. When I heard the Dime Square term, I assumed in a nasty way that it was like a millennial, like kind of attempt to place like outsized importance to a moment, and like in this kind of New York way. It's like, but I guess I'm mistaken. I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Um, there is that tendency in New York, and I guess among like younger people with like, traditions and significance. I think about like in bullfighting, when a bull gets pardoned,
Yeah.
it's an extremely rare moment that happens, in the way that I think of, cultural forces and movements and things like that.
Yeah.
But
You know what? One thing about Dime Square is I never really got to experience it to its fullest. Like, I remember there were times where I felt like, fuck, like the first time I'm ever like, semi-famous in my life, pseudo-famous in my life, recognizable, and I'm already married, like I can't really enjoy it. And plus I live in like outer borough Queens now. It takes me like an hour and a half to actually get to fucking Dime Square. So but it was fun, and now that I am a dad and basically landlocked until this boy grows out of this whiny little wimpy phase, I do appreciate the times that I had romping around that area and that scene a bit more.
yeah. Well, Adam, we have to wrap up, but where can people find you?
Yeah, two places, or I guess three places these days. I write for Tablet Magazine, where I'm an online editor. That's just tabletmag.com. My Substack, Safety Propaganda, is safetypropaganda.substack.com. And I still operate our podcast, System of Systems, which is systemofsystems.patreon.com.
Awesome. Adam, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. This was great.